my name's Jim Jackson. I've been writing for a long time, but I've only recently been published, as the story goes. So I published both fiction and nonfiction, and what I look at in my work is the stories that we tell ourselves that make us who we are. That's the central focus of my work. My nonfiction book is called "How to Tell a Really Good Story About Absolutely Anything in 4 Easy Steps," and it's about how you can use the power of story to get your message across. And then my novel is called "Stones in My Passway," and it's based on that kind of blues myth of going out to the crossroads and making a deal with the devil.
If you had to use one line you have written to describe the artist you started out as, what would that line be?
I thought long and hard about this, and I would have to say the first line from Stones in My Passway, the novel, and it's, "When the devil came to me at a lonely crossroads in the December pre-dawn and offered me a deal, I shouldn't have listened to that damn tickle in the back of my brain that shouted jump."
Near the end of a project, what is the emotion you find yourself more often feeling, and how long does it typically last?
Well, at the end of a project, I would have to say it's relief, honestly. Good, that one's done. And how long does it typically last? Well, it usually lasts until I start the next project. So I don't know, maybe about an hour, two if I have a good bottle of wine.
Dealing with critics, you've always found it better to what?
I have found dealing with critics, it's always good to channel my inner Betty Davis and like her say, what other people think of me is none of my business.
Hmm.
Right? As long as I'm doing what I believe I should be doing, then anything only stings for a minute. And my favorite poet, Kenneth Koch, said that the poet is most himself because he believes most in himself. And I'd probably extend that to all artists, really.
You were a mad scientist and could actually bring one of your characters to life. Who would that be, and why?
And it's a hard question because I write some pretty nasty people.
Hmm.
But if I had to choose, I'd have to say Papa Scratch, and that's dangerous because that's the devil in the novel. But it was it was just irresistible writing him. He became the star of the book. That's what kept me going back on the hard slog of writing scenes, was being able to write him. So, and I'm sure I could handle any temptation the devil could throw my way, but that's probably not true. No, I'm not great with temptation.
Evening the playing field where you never had to be concerned about money, time, resources. Give us one way in which you would be the same artist you are right now, and one way in which you would be vastly different.
So the same, I'd still be as driven. Like, I'd still crank out the words, maybe even more with a little more time, and I'd still focus on what I focus on, but the stories that make us who we are. Different, I'd probably be much better slept, honestly. And my family might think of me as someone other than that guy who pounds on the keyboard in the basement.
Yeah, that seems to be it right there. I mean, you have to write when you write, right? So
That's right. Yeah.
now that being said, would that screw up your cycle or your rhythm in terms of, or you probably would develop a new one, I would assume. But there is something to be said for you right at a certain ungodly hour, and it seems to
Yeah.
be creativity follows you and keeps you going throughout that process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You probably would get something new, but honestly, I might keep it the same a lot. It's my wife I have to thank for saying. I used to just write whenever I could squeeze it in. So, if I had a rough day at work, I could give myself an excuse not to write. But she said, "Why don't you just do it first thing when you get up?" And so I've been doing that for a while now, and that's fantastic. I can do an hour, half an hour when I first get up. The house is quiet, the creativity's flowing. It's really changed the whole process. Yeah. So it asks the question, right? That if you had the chance, to even taking the devil part out of it, if you had the chance to go back in your life and undo some kind of past decision that made you who you are today, that you were unhappy with, would you take that opportunity, right? Just to see how life would have been different. In the novel, that's the decision Wood Sweeney faces when he meets the devil at the crossroads. So he's been fighting with his wife, with his teenage daughter, and he just takes the deal to see how life could have worked out differently. And it's great at first. But then all the devil dealing, the hellhounds, all of that catch up with him, and he needs to find a way out of the bargain.
So is this a one-off, or do you have plans to continue this story?
I have plans for two more. I liked Papa Scratch. I liked writing the devil like that so much that he'll appear in two more for to make it a trilogy.
Very cool. Well, Jim, tell everybody where they can find you, how they get your book, and how they find you.
Right. Book, of course, Amazon. Stones in My Passway novel you could search for, or Really Good Story for the nonfiction. Easiest way, though, reallygoodstory.com. That'll have everything up there. That'll have a little bit about me, and I think even some embarrassing pictures as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this, sir. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking
Thank you, Joe.
And when you get the second book out, come talk to me, and we'll sit down and do a nice little in-depth interview.
Beautiful.
Can you discern pretty heavily or pretty easily what is garbage critique and what is constructive?
I like to think so. It takes a minute, right? For this novel, I had one beta reader who is still a good friend of mine, but almost wasn't, because she just ripped it apart, and so it took a couple weeks for me to realize, yeah, okay, no, that is a really good suggestion. I need to do that in this book. So yeah, I like to think that I can discern. Usually the garbage criticism is kind of an ad hominem attack, that it's attacking me personally for something rather than the work. So when I started off as a writer, I was I don't know what, 2021. I was in college, and I wanted to do it the respectable way, right? You get a degree, you do maybe a master's of fine arts, you hobnob with composers and actors and all that other highbrow stuff. So, but that didn't work out, and so I took the much more interesting way of lots of booze, some late night Chinese alleyways, and a couple dark nights of the soul.
Nice. And you're here, so hey,
That's right. Made it through. Yeah. It had to happen some way. This is the way it happened. So I'm not complaining.